Welcome. My name's Ione Hurrell. I am a former head teacher, and 5 years ago I founded the Thinking Academy, which provides coaching solutions for schools and executive one-to-one coaching for senior leaders. The reason I'm here today and the reason why I've set up this wellbeing series is because I really care deeply about the performance of people and about people being well and being able to be the best version of themselves. And what I've noticed in terms of the current situation which we all find ourselves in is that people are finding the challenges of being in a pandemic really stressful, really anxiety causing, really upsetting. And I just wanted to share a few tools, strategies, experiences that might help both my clients, friends and families, and help anyone out there that might find this current situation quite challenging to their own well-being. And it may be that this supports you and your own well-being, but you may find that this supports you in supporting other people within your friends and family and their well-being. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a 6-part series. Let me just talk you through the 6 weeks. So on week 1, which is this week, obviously, we're going to focus on understanding how we manage and cope with change. So we have a real understanding of where we are and how we can manage our own emotional well-being at this time. Then week 2, we're going to go on to the sort of neuroscience of how we think and our emotions and the impact that has on us. And then on week 3, we're going to talk about emotional literacy, how we can become much more engaged with our emotions and how we can be agile with them, and we can move emotional states really easily. And then we're going to look at some well-being ideas, and then we're going to look towards the end on week 5 about how we manage overwhelm. And I think this will be quite key because I can see potentially that we might be moving back into working environments and that might feel very overwhelming. So there'll be some tips and some tools that we can use at that point. And then finally, I'm going to finish week 6 on a bit of working on self-compassion, which I'm absolutely a massive advocate of. But I mean, these are 6 weeks, but if there are any other topics that people find useful, then you can always contact me and we can add more as we go through. So I thought the best thing today is to start with the challenge we find ourselves in and understand how we're managing through change so we can get a really good idea of where we're at and the tools we can have to help us through this time of change. So I thought, first of all, we'd look at really the sort of challenges that being in COVID-19 has thrown up for us. So I've created a list. It's not a, everything list, but it's just a guide as to what's really happening for us. So here are some of the challenges of COVID-19. You might have experienced some of these to a lesser or greater degree, but there are lots of issues that this has thrown up from us in terms of being concerned about our own health and the health of others around us, in terms of some job security challenges, in terms of having to work from home, in terms of being isolated from people, in terms of the pressures of finances and the pressures of time. I'm homeschooling and working, and that can throw up some real extreme challenges. And again, the impact on finances of this difficult time, particularly if you've been furloughed or your income's been reduced. So this is a really unsettling time. And one thing I wanted to pull up from this is actually we're all experiencing loss. And I say loss because we've experienced loss of our role in schools, we've experienced loss of routine, loss of structure of our days, loss of connection with people that we'd see every day. We've experienced some financial loss. So loss is a really key word for what we're experiencing, and it can really impact on us negatively. And I don't want to dwell too much on this list, but I want us to recognise that we're all coming from this space. And if there's one thing that's made us all connect more in terms of our experiences, then this pandemic has done that for us. because never have we all experienced in a locality or nationally or even internationally the same challenges that the COVID has provided, across the globe. So there is a tool, I suppose, that can demonstrate what we're actually experiencing and help us manage our well-being. And that's the Kubler-Ross change curve. And I'm sure some of you are already aware of it, but I thought I'd run through it in terms of how we need to be aware of what we need in order to maintain our well-being as we travel through change. So the change curve was created by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in the 1960s, late 1960s, based from her work on her international best-selling book on death and dying. And she studied people that were faced with their own mortality. So they'd had a terminal diagnosis. And it was from the point of being diagnosed that she noticed that how people cope with that significant change in life. But her change curve is now known to show how we manage loss and grief, which is why it's so pertinent in this current pandemic to be able to use and understand where we are in terms of our feelings. So if we have a look at the curve, this is what it looks like. And you've got there a line which says normal productivity. Obviously, normal is different for everyone else, but normally you have a good level of productivity. But the change curve shows what happens when we experience loss and the impact that has on our productivity. So I'm just going to talk to you about the stages of the change curve and what we can do to help one another. And then we can start to really recognise where we are, what we are feeling, that those feelings are perfectly normal and acceptable, but the things we can do to support ourselves in those stages. So everybody experiences loss like this. And the first stage of experiencing loss is denial. And that really is a natural process for buffering the impact of loss. Because that first stage of denial is when we really start to question things and we want to stick to our preferred reality. So we might be saying things such as, no, this can't be happening. This isn't right. I don't believe this. Because you are buffering yourself from the impact of loss, and it's perfectly normal. This is quite a short period of time, and I'm sure we all had those questions at the end of March when this whole thing's, arrived in terms of the government announcements, that we all had that denial phase. But denial moves very secondly into the anger phase, where we get quite resentful. And this anger can present itself in lots of ways. We can feel anger towards ourselves in terms of what should I have done more of to enable me to be more organised in this scenario? How could I have done that better? Should I have maybe done more online training or more online teaching that would have supported me in terms of managing this crisis? Or the anger, instead of being based internally for what you feel you should have done, can come out externally. We can be angry at the government for not doing enough. We can be angry at the situation, the pandemic, where it came from, organisations that we don't feel are doing enough. But anger is our way of processing what's happening to us. It's us getting used to this preferred reality, and it's perfectly normal and perfectly acceptable to be angry. We shouldn't suppress it. I'm sure if you've ever tried to suppress a feeling of either being angry or upset or disappointed, it will come out at some point, and it will come out when you least expect it or least want it to. So it's really important to recognise that you might be feeling angry and to be accepting of it. And if you really want to manage your well-being around anger and you don't want to be that shouty, negative person, it's just to communicate it in the best way and explain how you're feeling. So that might be talking to your friends or family saying, I'm really angry about the situation. I feel that this and this should have happened. I don't know how to manage that. I just want to talk about it. Can you listen to what I've got to say? Because then we are dealing with our anger and we're making the right choice about how we're expressing it. Some of us may feel angry, and in order to get that anger out, doing something like going for a run or exercising that anger out is really good. Exercising for anger can let it go, can let it process through the body, but it needs to be there. Then you'll notice on the productivity curve, when we go post anger, we go into what on this particular curve is described as apathy. On Kubler-Ross's original grief curve, it's written as depression. And the reason I wanted to not call it depression on the curve I'm showing you is because often when we think of depression, we think of clinical depression, and it's not that. So I've termed it as apathy. And apathy really is that absolute fog and tiredness and lethargy where you don't really want to do anything and you don't really want to go anywhere and you don't want to connect with people. What I did notice in speaking to friends and families and clients is last week, week 6, was a really apathetic week in terms of we were really in the bottom of that curve. I spoke to many people who said, I just don't feel like getting up in the morning and I feel tired all the time. I'm exhausted. I don't really want to get out of my pajamas. And there, this part of the curve is completely normal. And again, it's your body system coping with the loss and the grief. And in order to do that, it needs to re-energize itself. So it does need to rest to cope with all of this. So pushing on when you're feeling lethargic can feel twice as hard and it can put you back. So it's important for us, if you're feeling lethargic, to recognize that and to give yourself a bit of leeway and saying, well, maybe today I won't do that. And maybe today I will have a lie-in. And maybe today I will rest at home and not do much. But in terms of how apathetic we feel, we can do some things to help our well-being so we don't wallow too much, so we don't completely disconnect and shift from, productivity and wanting to do more. So if you feel like tired and lethargic, that's okay. It's absolutely fine to feel that way. Do what you need to do to look after yourself. And that may be resting for a bit, taking a nice warm bath, being kind to yourself. But also, it's really important to do some little things that make you feel positive, make you feel like you are moving, that you're not as lethargic. And it might be that you want to try 3 things, really. One is to focus on the small wins and recognise that and celebrate them. If it's as much as getting up and getting dressed, brilliant. If it's as much as getting up, making the bed and making something for lunch, fantastic. If it's as much as, making a phone call, brilliant. You've done something and you should celebrate those small wins, particularly when you're very, very tired. But don't put too much pressure on yourself. Don't put too much pressure on I should be doing these things. Remember, it's not a productivity contest. This is a pandemic, so we've got to be kind to ourselves. The other thing we can do is it's really important to connect. We may feel like we don't want to see or speak to anyone, but as human beings, it's really important for our well-being to stay connected. So making that Zoom call to your family members or making that Zoom call to a colleague or friend is really important and can bring you into a more positive state of well-being. So make sure you still stay connected. And thirdly, even though it may feel that you don't want to do anything and you're reaching for that 2-kilogram tub of Haagen-Dazs, it's not going to make you feel better. So think about what things you can do for your well-being that would make you feel a little bit better. Whether that's having a nice salad for lunch, or whether that's going for a quick walk, or whether that's just getting a better sleep pattern and making sure that you get the sleep that you need. But think about those 3 things. So concentrating on the small wins, staying connected with people, and making sure you are maintaining your physical health, which will maintain your emotional well-being and your mental health. Really important. And then as we move out of feeling apathetic, and I've noticed this in some conversations that I'm already having this week, we move into acceptance. Now, I'm not talking about accepting that it's okay that this pandemic's happened. Of course it's not. But it's more about accepting that there is going to be a new reality, that this is change and that change is inevitable, and we're okay with that. And in this phase, you'll notice your productivity and your motivation starts to increase and you want to do more. You want to start thinking about some of the things you've been reflecting on in the past few weeks about your mental well-being and thinking, I'd like to do a bit more of this, or I'd like to do a bit more of that. I'd like to spend some more time with my family after this event's happened. I'd like to make sure that I do this in my work when I get back to working in schools. So you start to notice your productivity happens, and which is great, but it should also come with a little bit of a health warning, as in don't run too fast, because if we race at that, we'll get exhausted. So we just really want to make sure that we are making little changes, and those little changes are positive, and that we are noticing that we are being more productive. Now, I know this whole change curve in terms of it's very linear, and it looks like we should move from denial to anger to apathy straight into sort of engagement and motivation. But I also want you to understand that you can slip back and slip forward in that all the time, and that's okay. It's not really linear, but they are stages, and those stages we can go forward into, and we can go backwards, and we can sit in one stage for a longer period of time, and some stages can be really short. But it's really important that we understand and can engage with our emotions and where we are. So that's what I really wanted to share with you today, was that this is okay. So some key points I want to leave you with at the end of today is that really, we're all in this together. You're not the only one. We're all here. We're all experiencing this. And that there are stages to this, and it's perfectly normal, and it's a human response to go through these stages. It's just really important to understand where you are in those stages and how you can look after yourself. So recognise those small wins and things that you're doing, and think about how you can look after yourselves in terms of your physical health and in terms of your mental well-being, and the importance of really staying connected and talking to people. Do recognise that if you know where you are on this change curve, and you might be sat there going, oh, I'm definitely there or definitely here, not everybody's going to be at the same stage as you. So it's giving other people in our families and our colleagues that understanding that if somebody seems a bit angry, it's probably because they are, and that's absolutely okay. Just help them to communicate that in the right way. And if somebody's feeling a bit apathetic, you can support them in that. You can say, God, that's really hard. I understand where you're coming from. How can I help you to feel a bit more like you've achieved, or a bit more motivated, or do you need some sleep? So just talk to people and ask them questions about how they are. If you're ever picking up the phone or having a Zoom call, no matter what you do, sometimes even opening an email, the first line is always, how are you? And always, or often, that's responded with, fine, yeah, great, okay, it's not too bad, it's a bit crappy, but that's, those are the standard answers. What's really important to really engage with people is to ask them how they are, and then say, no, how are you really? And then they will offer much more information about how they're feeling, and you can support people with their well-being once we dig a bit deeper. So that's really what I wanted to leave you with today. Obviously, next time on the second part of the series, I'm going to be looking at the neuroscience of our well-being and how you can support your thinking and emotions. In terms of if there's anything you would like more or less of, it would be really good if you could connect and engage with me. And you can either do that via email, and my email's here, leonie@thinkingacademy.co.uk, where you can just drop me a line and say, that's been really useful, I recognise where I am. Or you could just say, oh, do you know what, I'd really like a bit more support or ideas around, or tools to help me with. And I'd be more than willing to offer additional support if you need it, or maybe run another session on the end of this. Or you can contact me or share this webinar, this sort of blog, as it were, on the Thinking Academy on Twitter. So it's just @Thinking Academy, and you can connect with me there. But I hope you found today useful. It'd be really good to get your feedback, to know if it's been useful for you, but also to understand if there's anything more that I can support you with. Anyhow, I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you. Goodbye.